Claude responded. The first time my father called me for help, I was 11 years old, and he was stuck under the truck in our driveway. The first time my father called me for help, I was 11 years old, and he was stuck under the truck in our driveway. The last time he called me, I was 61, and he was lying on his kitchen floor, unable to reach the phone table. Both times, I dropped everything. That's not something a son thinks about. It's just something a son does. My father, Harold Pierce, never asked anyone for a thing in his life. 86 years old, still mowing his own lawn until his knees gave out on him 2 summers back. Still fixing his own gutters until I finally took the ladder away myself. He built cabinets for a living for 41 years, and he built our family the same way, measured twice, cut once, and never complained about the sawdust in his lungs at the end of a long day. When my mother passed 9 years ago, he didn't fall apart. He just got quieter, kept her reading chair exactly where it always sat, kept paying for 2 coffee mugs worth of coffee every morning out of habit, then pouring the second one down the drain like it was a small private ceremony nobody needed to know about. He never called me struggling, not once in 9 years of living alone in that house on Chestnut Ridge Road. So when my phone rang at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning, and I saw Dad on the screen, I already knew, before I even answered, that something was wrong. A man like Harold Pierce does not call before 7 unless the world has tilted. What I didn't expect was that the hardest part of that morning wouldn't be my father on the floor. It would be my own wife, standing at the top of our stairs, deciding I wasn't worth the 10 minutes it would take to hand me her keys. Hey neighbor, welcome back. Grab your coffee, because this one's going to sit with you a while. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from this morning, and if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. You're going to want to be here for what happens next. Let me back up first. My name is Gerald Whitfield. I'm 62 years old. I ran a hardware store on Route 9 for almost 30 years before I sold it and retired. And for a long time I believed that if you just kept the peace at home, that was the same thing as having a happy marriage. Took me until this year to understand how wrong that was. It was a Tuesday, the 9th of April, 6:15 in the morning. I remember the exact minute because I was standing at the bathroom mirror, razor halfway down my jaw, when the phone buzzed on the counter behind me. Dad. I picked up before the second ring finished. Gerald. His voice wasn't right. Thin and slow, like each word cost him something. Dad, what's wrong? I'm on the floor, son. Kitchen floor. I went down about 20 minutes ago. Can't quite get myself back up. Are you hurt? Is anything broken? My hip, I think. Left side. It's not good, Gerald. Don't move. I'm coming right now. Don't try to get up. I hung up and stood there in that bathroom for maybe 2 full seconds, my mind already running through logistics. My truck was at Miller's Collision on 4th Street. Getting a new transmission put in wouldn't be ready till Thursday, which left one vehicle in our driveway. My wife's car, a dark blue Lexus SUV she'd bought herself 2 years ago and treated like a second child. Full tank, always. She kept it that way. Denise was still in bed. I could hear her moving around upstairs, getting ready for her Pilates class, humming something under her breath like it was any other Tuesday. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Denise. No answer. I called again, louder. Denise, I need you. She appeared at the top of the stairs in her workout clothes, hair already pulled back, phone in her hand like she'd been mid-scroll. What's going on? My dad fell. He's on the kitchen floor. He thinks his hip's broken. I need to borrow your car. Mine's still at the shop. She didn't move for a second. Just looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger asking for spare change. Right now? My class starts at 7. Denise. My dad is on the floor. He can't get up. She sighed. An actual sigh, like I'd asked her to reschedule a hair appointment. Gerald, I paid for that class package in advance. It's non-refundable if I miss 3 sessions. I stood there. Something in my chest went very still and very cold, all at once. He's 86 years old and lying on tile, I said. I need the car for maybe an hour. Call an ambulance, she said, already turning back toward the bedroom. He doesn't want an ambulance. You know how he feels about those bills since Mom's hospice care. He'll refuse to go if I call one. Then call your sister. Sharon lives 2 hours away, Denise. You know that. She stopped in the doorway, one hand on the frame, and looked back at me with an expression I will remember for the rest of my life. Not worry, not urgency, just mild, distant irritation, like I was the inconvenience, not my father lying on a cold floor, unable to stand. This is exactly why I told you we needed 2 cars in this family, she said. Figure something out, Gerald. I really can't be late today. And she went back into the bedroom, didn't slam the door, just clicked it shut, soft and final, the same way you'd close a cabinet after putting away a dish. Like my father's broken hip was a scheduling inconvenience she didn't have room for in her Tuesday. I stood in that hallway for one long moment. Then, I pulled out my phone. Nathaniel Cole lived 3 houses down from us on Chestnut Ridge Road. A retired Army mechanic, 70 years old, drove a Ford pickup older than my marriage, and never once in the 14 years I'd known him had he been anything but steady. He and my father played checkers on the porch every Sunday afternoon it didn't rain. He'd carried my mother's casket, front left corner, 9 years ago. He picked up on the first ring. Gerald. Everything all right? Nate, I need a favor. My dad fell, might have broken his hip. My truck's in the shop and my wife's, she can't get away right now. Can you drive me over there and then to the hospital? Not even half a second of hesitation. Give me 90 seconds. I'm already grabbing my keys. That's it. No conditions. No class package to protect. 90 seconds. I called Dad back immediately. I'm coming, Dad. Nate's driving me. Don't move, don't try anything, just stay still and breathe. Okay, son. His voice cracked just slightly, just once. I'm sorry to be trouble. Dad, you've never been trouble a day in your life. Just hold on. Nate pulled into our driveway in under 2 minutes. I counted. The drive to Chestnut Ridge took 6 minutes, and every one of them felt like an hour. We found Dad exactly where he said he'd be, on his back on the kitchen tile, one hand gripping the leg of the kitchen table like it was the only solid thing left in the world. His face was gray, sweat along his hairline. But the second he saw me, his whole body seemed to loosen with relief. There he is, he said, trying for a smile that didn't quite land. I'm here, Dad. I'm right here. We got him carefully into Nate's truck. Nate steadying his shoulders while I supported his legs, both of us moving like we'd rehearsed it, though we hadn't. Mercy General was 12 minutes away. Dad gripped my hand the whole ride, his good hand wrapped around mine in the back seat, and somewhere around the halfway point he started apologizing again. I hate being like this, he said quietly. Needing people. You've spent 86 years being the one everybody needed, I told him. Let somebody carry you for one morning. He almost laughed. Almost. We checked into the ER at 6:52. A nurse named Patricia, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, had him in an exam room within 10 minutes. The doctor who came to see him was a younger man, Dr. Vance, calm and thorough, the kind who explains everything twice without being asked. Mr. Pierce, we're going to get some x-rays. Given your age and the way you're describing the pain, I want to rule out a fracture before we do anything else. Dad looked at me from the gurney, same question in his eyes my own kids used to have when they were small and scared. Do I need to worry? Gerald, we do whatever the doctor says, Dad. That's the whole plan. He nodded, settled back, closed his eyes. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 35 minutes. Vinyl chairs, fluorescent lighting, a muted television running a morning talk show nobody was watching. I drank coffee from a vending machine that tasted like scorched cardboard and didn't taste a single sip of it. Denise didn't text once. Not, how is he? Not, let me know. Nothing. At 9:40, Dr. Vance came out to find me, X-ray images in hand, his face careful but not alarmed. Mr. Whitfield, your father has a fractured hip. We're going to need to admit him and likely schedule surgery within the next day or two. It's a serious injury at his age, but it's very treatable, and he's stable right now. Can I see him? Give us 20 minutes to get him settled into a room. I sat back down, elbows on my knees, and thought about the word Denise had used, figure something out. While my father lay on cold tile with a broken hip, she'd been worried about a Pilates package. I pulled out my phone and called Nate, who'd waited the entire time in the parking lot without being asked to. He's stable, I told him. Fractured hip. They're admitting him. Thank God, Nate said, and I could hear he meant every word of it. Nate. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done. You'd have figured it out, he said. But you shouldn't have had to figure it out alone. That's what neighbors are for, Gerald. That's what family's for, too, when it's working right. I let that sentence sit with me for a moment. When it's working right. I stayed with Dad the rest of that day. We watched an old Western on the little television bolted to the wall, and he told me the same story about building my mother's china cabinet that he'd told me probably 200 times before, and I let him tell it again like it was brand new, because some stories aren't really about the words. They're about who's sitting there listening. Around 4 in the afternoon, just before visiting hours started winding toward the end, he took my hand and his voice changed. That thin, hurting voice from the morning was gone. This was the voice he used when he meant something all the way down. Gerald. Yeah, Dad. Denise didn't come. It wasn't a question, so I didn't treat it like one. She had her class, I said quietly. He nodded slowly, looking toward the window where the afternoon light was falling gold and low across the parking lot. He didn't say anything ugly about her, didn't raise his voice, just nodded, like he was filing something away in a place he kept for things that mattered. She went to Pilates, Dad, I said. While you were on the floor, he turned his head and looked at me, and something moved across his face, quiet and deliberate, like a decision settling into place. I see, he said. That's all. Just those 2 words. But I understood them completely. I kissed his forehead before I left that evening. Nate drove me home in comfortable silence, an old country station playing low on the radio, and somewhere on Route 9, watching the porch lights flicker on one by one along the street, I realized I wasn't furious at Denise anymore. I was simply, finally, done. If you've been with me a while, do me one favor, real quick. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Doesn't cost you a thing, but it means the world to a channel like this one. Drop a comment too. I read every one of them. Some people spend a whole marriage making withdrawals from an account they never once deposited into. Denise had been overdrawn for years. I just hadn't been willing to look at the balance. Wednesday, April 10th, 6:40 in the morning. I woke before my alarm, which is how you know something's sitting heavy on your chest even while you're sleeping. Denise was still asleep beside me, breathing slow and even, completely undisturbed by any of it. I got up quietly, went downstairs, made coffee in the loud old percolator she hated, and didn't feel one bit sorry about the noise. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the sun come up over the Hendersons' fence line, thinking about my father lying in that hospital bed, about the way he'd said "I see," about 51 years of a man never once asking for anything, finally needing something, and the 2 words he used when the one person besides me who was supposed to show up didn't. I was on my second cup when I heard Denise on the stairs. She came into the kitchen in her robe, glanced at the coffee maker, then at me. You're up early. Every morning for 18 years, I said. Guess it's still a surprise. She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. There was a silence between us, the specific kind that married people recognize immediately, the kind that's waiting on someone to bring something up first. How's Harold? She finally asked. Harold. Not Dad. Not your father-in-law. Harold. Like he was an acquaintance from her book club she was only vaguely keeping tabs on. Fractured hip, I said. They're keeping him for surgery tomorrow. She nodded slowly, like she was tasting the words to see if they required anything further from her. How was your class? I asked. She blinked, just once, but I caught it. It was fine, she said carefully. Gerald, I want you to understand, yesterday morning was really difficult timing for me. Difficult timing. I let those 2 words sit in the air between us. My father was on a kitchen floor with a broken hip, I said, and you were worried about a cancellation fee, but, sure. Difficult timing. Gerald, please. I'm not doing this right now, I said. I'm just trying to explain myself. I know, I said. I heard you the first time. Yesterday, at the top of the stairs. I rinsed my mug, picked up my keys and my jacket, and walked toward the door. Where are you going? She asked. To see my father, I said, without turning around. Nate drove me again. He didn't ask questions, just drove, one hand loose on the wheel, An easy quiet between two men who'd known each other long enough not to need words to fill every gap. We got to Mercy General a little after 9. "I'll be out here," he said. "Take your time. Nate, you don't have to sit in a parking lot all morning." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "I'll be here, Gerald. Some people just show up. You learn to notice who they are." Dad was sitting up in bed when I walked in, color better in his face. The hospital gown traded for his own flannel shirt because apparently he'd charmed Patricia into letting him wear it. He had the newspaper crossword balanced on his lap. "6 letters," he said, the second I stepped through the door. "Ungrateful." I stopped in the doorway and stared at him. He looked up over his glasses, completely deadpan. "For the crossword, Gerald." I laughed harder than I had in months. "Perfect fit," I said. INGRATE. "Wait, that's 8. He waved me off. "Details. Sit down, smart aleck." We sat together easy and quiet for a while. The kind of quiet that only exists between two people who've loved each other long enough not to need to fill it. He finished another clue. I drank the hospital coffee, and it tasted like burnt rubber, and I didn't complain because sitting there with him, even in a stiff plastic chair, was exactly where I wanted to be. Then he set the crossword down, folded his hands, and looked at me steadily. "I want to call Mitchell this morning," he said. Mitchell Hale, attorney, 36 years in practice out of an office on Elm Street. He'd handled Mom's estate paperwork and drawn up Dad's will 4 years ago. Careful man. Listened more than he talked. "Okay," I said carefully. "I've been thinking since yesterday afternoon," he said. "Dad, you don't have to. Gerald Thomas Whitfield." All 3 names. I hadn't heard all 3 since I was 16 and wrapped my first car around a mailbox. "Don't finish that sentence." I closed my mouth. He looked at me with those steady, clear eyes, the morning light coming soft through the hospital window, making him look somehow younger, or maybe just exactly like himself. "I built that shop from nothing," he said quietly. 41 years of cabinets, and your mother and I scraped together every nickel so what we built would go somewhere that mattered. To people who show up." He paused. "Denise didn't show up, Gerald." "I know, Dad. Not just yesterday," he said. "Not when your mother was in hospice and I needed someone to sit with me those last nights. Not at Christmas 3 years back when you had to leave dinner early because I had the flu. And not yesterday when I was on my kitchen floor with a broken hip." "She had her class," he said, and shook his head slowly. Every single example landed heavy and quiet, like stones dropped one by one into still water, because he was right about every one of them. "Dad," I said, "I'm not upset with you for this." "I'm not upset either," he said. And remarkably, he wasn't. His voice was calm, steady as a level laid flat on a countertop. "I'm just being accurate." He reached into the drawer of the bedside table, pulled out a small card, Mitchell Hale's direct number written on the back in his own careful handwriting. He'd come prepared. This hadn't been a decision made overnight. This had been building for years, and yesterday had simply been the final measurement taken. "Do you want me to step out?" I asked. He considered it. "No," he said. "Stay." One word. Everything in me went still and grateful at once. He dialed at 9:50. Mitchell picked up on the second ring. "Mitchell Hale." "Mitchell, it's Harold Pierce. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Mr. Pierce. Never a bad time for you. How are you?" "I'm at Mercy General, actually. Broke my hip yesterday." A brief pause. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Harold." "Serious?" "Serious enough to clear my head some," Dad said. And even from a hospital bed the morning after breaking his hip, there was a dignity in his voice that no amount of pain could touch. The kind of dignity that gets built slowly, over 86 years of doing right even when it costs you something. "I need to make some changes to my will," he said. "Fairly specific ones." "Of course," Mitchell said. "Do you want me to come to you?" "If you're able. Today, if possible." "I can be there by 2. "Perfect," Dad said. "My son will be with me." "Very good, Harold. I'll see you both at 2. He hung up, set the phone down, and picked his crossword back up like he hadn't just rearranged the entire shape of our family's future. Like he hadn't just loved me in the deepest, most permanent way a father knows how. "Dad," I said, my voice coming out lower than I meant it to, "you don't have to do this because of me." He didn't look up from the puzzle. "I'm not doing it for you. Son, I'm doing it because I earned the right to decide where my life's work lands, and I've made my decision. He glanced up over his glasses. Any questions? I had about 30. I asked. None of them. No, sir. Good, he said, going back to his puzzle. Now go find me something edible in that cafeteria. Whatever they fed me this morning tasted like a decision somebody regretted making. Mitchell Hale arrived at 1:55, gray suit, worn leather briefcase, the kind of handshake that told you he understood the weight of the room he was walking into. He sat across from my father with a legal pad, and I took the corner chair, quiet, a witness. They talked for 40 minutes. I won't put every word of it here, some things deserve to stay private between a man and his lawyer. But I'll tell you this much. By the time Mitchell clicked his pen shut and slid the pad back into his briefcase, the future that Denise Whitfield had been quietly assuming for 18 years of marriage had been completely and legally rewritten. The house on Chestnut Ridge Road, paid off free and clear since 2011, the workshop out back, every tool in it, the half-finished rocking chair Dad had been building for his first great-grandchild, the savings account he and Mom had built dollar by dollar for 4 decades, and $8,000, earmarked specifically for the Veterans Support Center on Route 9, because Harold Pierce had volunteered there every second Saturday for 12 years straight, driving other old soldiers to appointments they couldn't get to on their own. Denise's name appeared exactly 0 times. Figure something out, someone had told me the morning before. Turns out I had. When Mitchell stood to leave, he shook my hand at the door and looked back at my father, already settled back into his crossword, unbothered, completely himself. Your father, Mitchell said quietly, is one of the sharpest men I've worked with in 36 years of this business. I looked at him too. Yeah, I said. I've always known that. I left the hospital around 4:30. Nate drove me home, read my face the way old friends do, not digging for information, just checking that I was still standing upright. Everything all right? He asked. Yeah, I said quietly. Everything's exactly the way it should be. He nodded, put the truck in drive, and we headed back toward Chestnut Ridge. My phone stayed silent in my pocket the whole way. Denise hadn't called once, all day. She had no idea. Not yet. But she would. Thursday, April 11th, 8:20 in the morning. I was standing at the counter at Miller's Collision, signing the paperwork for my truck, new transmission, oil changed for free, because Tom Miller and I had known each other since our boys played Pop Warner football together. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Denise. I let it ring out. Not strategy. I just didn't have anything worth saying to her yet. I finished signing, shook Tom's hand, and walked out into a cool April morning, the kind where the air still has a little winter left in it. I sat in my truck a minute before starting the engine, thinking about bringing my father home, getting him settled with his crossword and his tools and his dignity fully intact. That's what the day was going to be about, not Denise, not the calls. My phone buzzed again, Denise, then a third time, a fourth, a fifth. Something's happening, I thought, and pulled out onto Route 9 toward Mercy General. I had a father to bring home. He was ready and waiting when I arrived, sitting up in a wheelchair by policy, flannel shirt, small overnight bag on his lap, Patricia walking alongside him with a clipboard. I can walk to the truck myself, he announced to the hallway in general. I broke a hip, not my legs. Patricia laughed, the real kind. You take care now, Mr. Pierce. I always do, honey, he said, and squeezed her hand. Don't let anybody tell you you're not good at your job. You are. She smiled and stepped back, looking like she was fighting to keep her composure. Even leaving in a wheelchair, my father left people a little better than he found them. I got him settled carefully into the truck, his hip still tender, and he noticed my phone lit up in the cup holder. Denise, Denise, Denise. 11 missed calls before 9 in the morning. He said nothing, just fastened his seatbelt and looked out the window, calm as a man who'd made peace with something a long time ago. I got him home to Chestnut Ridge, the small brick house with the porch swing my mother used to sit on every evening, oak trees along the front walk just starting to bud out for spring. I got him settled in his recliner, made him tea, the way he liked it, and went through Dr. Vance's discharge instructions with him line by line. He was watching me from across the room, hands wrapped around his mug. "Sit down a second," he said. I sat. "What I did yesterday," he said. "The will. I didn't do that to punish Denise." His eyes were steady, no bitterness in them at all, just the plain truth the way he'd always delivered it, warm and unmovable. "I did it because it's right," he said. "Because your mother and I built something together, and it belongs with someone who understands what building something together actually means." He looked at me a long moment. "And Gerald," he said, his voice dropping just slightly, more deliberate now, "I need you to think about your own life. Not the money, not any of that. About whether you're happy, whether you're loved the way a man like you deserves to be loved." He held my eyes. "Because you've been showing up alone for a long time, son, and a man who shows up deserves someone standing beside him when he does." The room went quiet. Down the street, somebody's dog barked twice and went still. My throat tightened, and I didn't look away from him. "Yeah," I said, voice rough. "I know, Dad." He nodded once, patted my hand twice, the same way he had in the hospital, and let it go. "Now," he said, "are you going to answer that phone or leave it buzzing all afternoon?" My phone was going again on the table between us. "Denise, call number 31. I looked at it, looked at him. He raised one eyebrow. "Not yet," I said, and turned it face down. "Not yet," he repeated, tasting the patience in it. I left Chestnut Ridge around 1, drove home, parked behind Denise's Lexus, and sat in my truck a full minute. 38 missed calls. 38. I went inside. Denise was on the edge of the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, both hands wrapped around her phone. She looked up the second I walked in, eyes red and sleepless. All that careful composure cracked wide open, and, underneath it, was something that looked exactly like a woman who'd spent an entire day realizing precisely what she'd done. "Gerald," she said, standing fast. "I've been calling you all day." "I know," I said, hanging my keys on the hook. "Did you know?" Her voice cracked. "About the will. Did you know he was going to do that?" I turned to face her fully. "No. I found out the same time you did." She pressed her fingers to her mouth, tried to steady herself. When she spoke again, quieter, there was real fear underneath it, the kind that shows up right when consequences finally catch a person. "Mitchell's office called to confirm the changes were filed," she said. "Gerald, do you understand what that means?" "I understand it completely," I said, calm as I'd ever been in my life. "Then talk to him," she said. "Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him I was going to come to the hospital. You just what?" I said. She stopped. I took one step toward her, not angry, just present, in a way I hadn't let myself be in years, because for the first time I had nothing left in me that needed protecting. "You had a Pilates class," I said, while my 86-year-old father lay on a kitchen floor with a broken hip. While Nate Cole sat in a parking lot for 3 hours because that's what neighbors do, while I drank vending machine coffee under fluorescent lights, waiting to find out if my father was okay. The color drained slowly out of her face. "My father made his decision," I said, "the same way you made yours. Clearly, deliberately, without asking anybody's permission. Gerald, please. He's spent 86 years showing up for people." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For my mother, for me, for strangers at that veterans center who needed a ride to an appointment. He never once chose a Pilates class over somebody who needed him. He just finally stopped, expecting the rest of us to do the same. The living room went completely still. Denise looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time in years, and something moved across her face, past fear now, into something deeper, the look of a person finally understanding the true size of what she'd lost. Not the money, not the will. Me. She finally understood she'd lost me, and the man standing in front of her, calm, clear, keys already in hand, wasn't the man who'd stood at the bottom of those stairs the morning before, still hoping she'd say yes. That man was gone. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down, then back up at me, eyes wide, something in them that might have been hope. I looked at her for exactly 1 second, and felt the last thread of 18 years finally go slack. Not with anger, with something quieter. Release. I picked my keys back up off the hook. I'm going to check on my father, I said. I opened the front door. The morning air hit me clean and cold and honest. I turned back one last time. Denise stood in the middle of the living room, phone glowing in her hand. 38 calls worth of consequence written across every line of her face. You should probably answer that, I said. I closed the door behind me and exhaled. The kind of breath that comes from somewhere so deep down you didn't even know you'd been holding it. I stood on that porch a moment, spring air on my face, and something settled over me I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not bitterness, just clarity. The plain, quiet clarity of a man who'd finally, after years of smoothing things over and telling himself it was fine, seen his life exactly as it really was. I hadn't been married for 18 years. I'd been enduring for 18 years. There's a difference, and it took my father falling on a kitchen floor for me to finally see it. I walked to my truck and started the engine. The radio came on low, something old, something my father used to hum out in his workshop on Saturday mornings, sawdust drifting in the light through the window. I let it play the whole way to Chestnut Ridge. I didn't decide anything that night, beyond one thing. I wasn't going back into that house. Not that night, and somewhere in the quiet place where a man knows things before he's ready to say them out loud, I already understood it wasn't just going to be that one night, either. A father's love doesn't need an audience, and it doesn't need to be asked twice. If this one meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like it. I'll see you next time, neighbor. Claude responded, showing up isn't something you save for the big moments, it's built quietly, one ordinary Tuesday at a time, until it becomes the whole shape of who you are. Showing up isn't something you save for the big moments, it's built quietly, one ordinary Tuesday at a time, until it becomes the whole shape of who you are. When life finally asks the real question, it doesn't check your excuses, only your habits. So call your father today, not because something happened, but simply because you still can. That's the whole lesson, and it's enough. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its message about showing up for the people we love stays with you as something real and worth carrying.